Hello and welcome to the White Witch podcast with me, Carly. Hope you are all well, witches. On today's episode, I'm afraid we don't have a book review. I haven't been able to plough through my most recent book, and I haven't had any that I've been happy to recommend so far. I just wanted to, before we kick off and get into today's episode, just wanted to remind you, if you haven't signed up for my Patreon, The Witches Institute, you can find grimoire sheets for the White Witch podcast over there, extra Patreon podcast episodes. I've just released an episode on fairy paths, which gets really deep in relation to fae lore. We also look at areas like death paths, spirit paths. There are witchy meditations on there, 4 hedge witch studies a month covering crystals, power animals, herbs, trees. We have a monthly story, which can be a ghost story, folklore, or a look at a famous witch in history. We have a monthly gathering for our witchy community. And we also have a place where all our witches can catch up with one another. We also have the Literary Witches Coven, where we read along on a book each month. Entirely optional to join on that, but that is another element to the Patreon. On today's episode, I am joined by the wonderful Bianca Jo Dryberg, who is a crystal specialist. She works for Rocks and Rubies, a gorgeous specialist crystal shop right by Colchester Castle in Essex. I've attached all links in the show notes for Rocks and Rubies where she works, but also links to her socials, as Bianca, or B as she also goes by, is focusing on sharing knowledge there and creating a safe space in regards to spirituality and well-being. I'd also be grateful if you listen to this episode and the show in general. If you could give me a review, ideally a 5-star one, as this helps other witches to find the show too. So, back to today's episode. You might want to grab a pen and pad for this episode. There is a ton of information that is far from basic crystal knowledge. So, join me after the break to speak with Bee, the literal queen bee of crystals. Welcome back. So, I am here with who I like to think of as the crystal queen. Bianca, welcome to the White Witch podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
So I'm so excited you're on. I met Bee. I was in Essex for a witchy event at Colchester Castle in December, and I felt compelled to go into Rocks and Rubies, a beautiful crystals, like witchy spirituality shop in Colchester, which you must go there if you are there, or just check them out. I basically asked B for some information in regards to a particular crystal, and I just remember thinking, this lady knows her onions in regards to crystals, and I just cheekily had to ask if you might come onto the podcast. And here we are.
Yes. Yeah, I've been very much looking forward to this. And I did fangirl a little bit in the shop, because when you came in, I recognised your voice. I was thinking, where do I know this person from? I was like, I don't recognise their face. And then you said podcast. I was like, oh.
I was amazed you would know what the podcast was. Honestly, when you said you know the podcast, I was like, no way, you actually know of the podcast. Made my day, honestly. So I just wanted to kind of say, Bianca has got so much information. I think it's going to get quite involved. Now, to kind of like start things off, Bianca, how did you get into spirituality, crystals? Where do we begin?
Great question. So my mum was quite spiritual when I was growing up. She was like into tarot reading, angel cards, quite lightly, but it was really fun and engaging as a child to like watch and get involved with in the steps that she allowed me to. And crystal collecting is a really great starting point as a kid. So we got started on the crystals. That was all grand. Then when I got older, I started getting into more the witchy side of things as a teenager, which, you know, it was like I did a love spell and I ended up with like my best friend and things. And I was like, oh wow, this stuff actually works. Not always in the ways that you intended it, but yeah, it was like really got me into it. And then I kind of came out of it for a bit. Just life got in the way, and I started having, which is something I think isn't spoken about enough in the spiritual community, like a bit of spiritual psychosis. It got quite intense. So I backed out of it. And then when I was older, as an adult in my 20s, I went past rocks and rubies, actually. I just felt drawn to go in, like, oh, cool, ants and crystals and ages. Let's go have a gander. Bought myself a malachite necklace, just because it looked gorgeous, beautiful greens. Then on the bus home, I was with my best friend and we were looking at like the properties for a giggle. And it was like, helps you cut out toxic ties. And I was like, maybe it'll help me get rid of this dodgy boyfriend I've had for a while. And lo and behold, a couple of months passed and there was a complete change in the energy exchange between me and him, and it became a lot easier to let that go. And I was like, oh, whoa, this stuff works. And then I started getting slowly but surely, it started off with the chakras, started looking at that, working on that. My mental health was improving, my physical health was improving, and then I started getting back into more of like the witchy side of things and divination, and got a job at Rocks and Rubies, and it just keeps going forward.
I love this. So I did want to delve into, so can you tell us a little bit about what you do now work-wise in relation to crystals and all things spiritual?
Yeah, so I'm technically, I guess, a sales assistant at Rocks and Rubies, but it's so much more than that. Customers will come into the store and they'll be like, I've got this issue, and I'm like, okay, and sometimes they open up a bit about it. Sometimes I'll just give them the general thing, because obviously it's people's private lives. But we find crystals, and we also sell things like herbs. So I'll recommend like certain rituals and practices they could do to perhaps cleanse negative energy if someone's feeling a bit low. And yeah, it's like a personalized prescription service almost, to direct people in the right way. And it's always no pressure. So I really enjoy that. And I recently did a crystal healing course, and I just need to do some case studies, and I'll be a qualified and insurable crystal healer.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah.
You know your stuff. Honestly, I felt so cheeky asking you to come on, but when we were in the shop, honestly, there was like nothing you couldn't go into. And I just remember thinking, I've always really wanted to get into crystals on the podcast. This is the lady. Like, I'm gonna shoot my shot. Just ask her to come on. She's so knowledgeable. So yeah, and actually, I'm kind of like going off track a little bit, but you said something really poignant about spiritual psychosis, and I'm always interested, and I appreciate you might not want to get into this, but is there anything you think needs to be said on that front in relation to, because you said obviously it's not an area that's talked about enough, so is there anything that you kind of want to say that someone might benefit to hear from?
I would say that first of all, there's a reason why we say that grounding and centering should be one of your first ports of call, because I think that's the key to prevent you from getting lost too much in the spiritual realm and having your feet into logic and reasoning on this plane. And also not to use, and this is crystals included, using crystals and things as a replacement for therapy and even medication in certain cases. These are to support you and act as like cheerleaders and to give you the opportunities and the environment, but you need to do the work, please.
Yes, say it louder for the witches at the back. Yes. Seriously, I love this, and it is so true. And I've been, I've fallen victim to doing this myself, and I really think it's such a good message to hear and a reminder. So thank you. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And actually, yeah, you're right. Like, you've got to do the therapy, do the work. Like, you can't just be relying on all these other extra tools. It does come from you first. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
Are there any other warnings that we might need to know before we delve into crystals or anything like this?
Yeah. So majority of the time, crystals are perfectly safe, especially if they're polished. So it means they're not just raw chunks that have been brought out of the earth. Most things you'll find in a crystal shop are generally safe, but it's just things like, do your research beforehand, especially if you're involving putting it in water, especially if you want to drink that water. Be careful. I know it sounds obvious, but don't eat things. Like, you can get things that are made of sulfur and things. So please keep an eye. And also the little tumbles, they can look like sweets to children. So be mindful of that as well. That's generally it. Regarding energy wise, I don't think you can really go wrong unless you add, for example, if I'm menstruating and I'm moody, I have to not wear carnelian because I get really angry because it's too much fire energy. But other than that, I would say, just be aware of the toxicity in certain minerals, just like you would with plants, really.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, you know, more times where we're getting our children involved in all things witchy, you have got to be, I guess, really careful with the crystals, and they do look like sweets. And, you know, and even if you're not kind of getting your kids involved with them, but they're picking them up, and it's a good reminder, I think. So what have you got for us today, B? Like, unravel all your information and tell us all, please. So excited.
So I thought I would start out, I was originally going to start out with like the layers that I kind of see how crystals work. So I will be covering like, why is it a magical item as opposed to just a rock or a mineral? But first I thought I'll actually go through how to work with crystals as a base. So picking a crystal, some people find this really easy. They come in the store, they see something they're drawn to, they're like, I want this, and they'll research it in their own time. Other times it can be quite overwhelming. You can Google like crystals for love and you get like 20 different ones. And to be honest, sometimes when it's things like just your random like Elle magazine and things, they don't have a real spiritual advisor. They're just picking common names and saying, oh, this is for this. But I would try and get into a physical store if you can and just see what you're drawn to and then look up the properties. If not, you can kind of look it up by color, which I'll go into a bit, but just trust your intuition as to what you need. If not, get a pendulum out, see which way it's swinging, and it should direct you to the crystal you're really needing. I would also really recommend that you cleanse your crystals when you get them home. Like, we try and cleanse the crystals in store, but people come by, they touch them, the postman might touch them if you get them delivered, and all this energy kind of accrues over it. So I'd recommend cleansing, which you can do in various ways. My favorite is using selenite, which is a crystal in itself. Selenite is this gorgeous white color. It almost glows by itself, the way it picks up a light, and it very much has full moon energy. And it's also really cheap, really readily available. So you can just wave that over your crystals and use your intention. And then the other thing I would say that you can do is, and it's kind of optional, is to program your crystals. So crystals will have a positive effect regardless, even if you just have one kind of in your pocket, you don't really know what it does. But if you really want to work with them, and this is especially if you intend to use them as spell ingredients, is to set an intention with them. So you can bond with a crystal, you can just carry it with you, sleep with it, meditate with it, see what energies or what vibes come with you. And then you can ask it. You can do this out loud. You can do it through meditation and your mind's, I was about to say your mind's eye, your mind's ears. You know what I mean? And just kind of be like, I'm asking you to please protect me, for example, to create a shield and protect my aura. And then it kind of, sometimes you'll even find that you'll get a crystal and it will tell you through meditation, or something will pop in your head as to why it's there for you. And if that is the case, definitely roll with it, because that's it's a gorgeous feeling when you kind of sense that about a crystal. And you can always cleanse the crystal after you've kind of used it and kind of reprogram it at a later date. So there's, I would say you could work with them. You can wear crystals, you can keep them in your purse. I like to keep them in my bra, as long as they're kind of small enough and tumbled. We keep pyrite, which attracts wealth in the till at work. Having like an amethyst by your bed, so kind of finding logical key locations to pop them in is a good idea. It doesn't really matter the size of the crystal, to be honest. I mean, if it's small, maybe have it more on your person or close to you, but you don't need a massive piece to have a massive effect. You can use them in crystal grids. You can use them as spell ingredients, offerings to deities, for altars. You can use it like as a physical touch point or a focal point. You can use it in your energy fields. Like there's so many uses. I could go on and on for hours about just that.
You did make me laugh about the putting him in your bra, because I've nearly taken my ex-boyfriend out by whipping my bra off, and a rose quartz crystal just flew through the air. So
I often hear like a ding at the end of the day when I take off my bra, and I'm like, oh, it's either that or money. I tend to keep money in my bra. Yeah.
As women have for centuries.
Very much so.
Such a great place to store things. I am really curious about crystal grids. Is there anything that you could give a basic like me, or resource, or anything you could say you could just start trying with this, perhaps, on that front?
Yeah, so you can buy crystal grid bases, which are usually things like Metatron's cube, and you can place like just little tumbles or little points on it with a set intention. So say, for example, I wanted to create a love crystal board. I could use a generic one and then use crystals that are good for love, such as rose quartz, rhodochrosite, rhodonite, on that board. It can get a little complicated, but I would just say it sticks to it simple. And in my opinion, you could just make a pretty display and have it kind of got symmetry, and that works. One of my favorite ways to use a crystal grid is actually on the house. So as part of my protection ritual, which I don't always expose all of it, I think that's another way to have good spiritual protection, is don't tell everyone what you do, but I'll give you a tip. Is I create a grid on my house, which is literally just putting a protection crystal in each corner. So I have some in the garden, like on the outer perimeter, and then again on the inner perimeter in each corner of the house. And that is a crystal grid in itself.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the not telling everybody what you've done, therefore keeping the whole system working. So yeah, that's a great bit of information.
Yeah, same way you wouldn't tell everyone your password, you know what I mean? Might be like, it's got the letter P in it, that's all you need to know.
Exactly that. So I'll be guided from you for where to go on this. So I love the idea of the offerings, how you can use them. That's just great. Loads of different tips and things I've got in there. I wondered about, are you happy to perhaps go into maybe like the areas like maybe the chakras, or I don't know, like if you're perhaps working on certain areas in your body, and if there's any that you feel, any information you can give on that front?
Yeah, I can talk about chakras. So every crystal relates to at least a chakra. Many do more than one. Some of them even work on the kind of chakra column as a whole. So the easiest way to find a crystal that's good for a certain chakra is using color magic. So each of the colors, I think most people should know this, is each chakra has a color associated with it. So you've got root chakra is red, and then it goes orange, green, light blue, dark blue, indigos, purples, whites, that kind of spectrum. So kind of follow that. So say, for example, you're having trouble with confidence, which relates to the solar plexus chakra. That color is yellows and gold. So find a yellow gold crystal. It's like a cheat sheet almost. Like this is kind of the skeleton that you then kind of build upon to discover the energy of a crystal. But beyond all that, if you feel like you pick a crystal up and you're like, wow, this really makes me feel confident, and it could be the color blue, and you're thinking, this is to do, just go with it, because you can issues from different angles. For example, you might have an issue in confidence, which, yes, is the solar plexus, but it might actually be more social anxiety you have. So you might need to work on your throat chakra to communicate better. So it's not always what you first think it might be. So yeah, definitely.
That's already been, honestly, that's a great way of looking at it, because I that is an area that I actually do struggle with. So and I'm always thinking, maybe actually you're right, like maybe if you do struggle with social anxiety, looking at the throat chakra. So for me, that's a new take on it that I'm going to look at. I love what you said about okay, so coming back to the color magic side, that's really got my interest. I love what you said about not working with, okay, so come back to the earthing and the grounding side. If that's something you need to work on, that's a great way. So perhaps you could look at kind of green chakra, green crystals rather, and ones that obviously then you'll kind of maybe time that in with the heart chakra as well. You can kind of combine all of these together, really, can't you? And then you can build on it even more. So if you're offering up crystals to deities, then you can kind of work with maybe more colors along that front that are aligned with a particular deity as well. You can just get really like intuitively guided by it, can't you? And just see what feels right. I actually had a dream which was so bizarre about a crystal that I've never ever had this, and it was before I met you, and it was a couple of weeks before I sort of came along to Colchester, and I got yellow carnelian, I think I want to say. I will double check this and I'll sort of put it in the show notes. But I had this dream, and I woke up, and I'm a basic witch when it comes to crystals, genuinely. It's an area that I'm really delving into currently, but it's never been one I've been confident about. And I'd never even had this crystal. I'd never heard of it, never seen it before. Just came up in my dream immediately, like had to go and get some. I was like, but yeah, it's really interesting because I'm guessing, but I think, I'm just trying to remind myself, I'm sure yellow is the solar plexus as well.
Yes,
and you can kind of, I guess, put the message out there perhaps to anyone you work with, like spirit, before you even enter the crystal shop, to like spirit guides or your deities or your angels or whoever you work with, like, okay, well, what crystal do you think I need to work with? Because if you're lucky, you might get a little message pop up, or synchronicity, and you can kind of roll with that before you even enter the shop maybe, and see how you feel when you get there as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like I remember I did a meditation, so I work with spirit animals, not spirit animals, but animal spirits in my spiritual practice. And I work very closely with a fox spirit. And I did a meditation. It was very intense. I would probably be more inclined to say it was an astral projection. And it had me going through all these puzzles and things. It was very odd. But I ended up opening a drawer on the desk, and there was a carnelian there. And then a couple of days later, I did one of those like pound, it's like a gumball machine. We don't have one, but a gumball machine, and out came a carnelian. I was like, okay. I love carnelian now. I love it.
Yeah, I same. I've kind of, since I've picked up that particular one, I've really started to, before everything was just, oh, it's a pink crystal. Like, oh, that's pretty, it's pink. I had no real, I just couldn't connect with them. It just wasn't, but I am now, like, it's completely changed for me of late. But yeah, I think, it's interesting just seeing what intuitively comes up. You also mentioned about a certain crystal you can't wear when you're on, your time of the month. And that's really interesting. She said about the fire energy. And I guess if you are too much of one energy and you're trying to connect with another, that's a really good way to maybe look at it as well. Because I mean, I've got way too much fire, and I struggle with water energy, and I'm trying to work on a sort of balance, because I've like most of my birth chart and so on is like loads of fire. So yeah, I guess you could kind of look at a plan of balance by connecting with crystals that may be aligned with that element that you want to bring more of in, I guess.
Very much so. I completely agree. I would always encourage people to go for what feels uncomfortable.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
specifically with like crystals and things, you're not going to find something that's going to ruin your life. Like moldavite does not ruin your life. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so whatever feels uncomfortable, there's probably a reason that you need it, to balance something out, or because it's something that you're refusing to face or something. But yeah, follow that uncomfortable feeling or that opposite energy.
Oh, you know what? I've actually had that same conversation with somebody at the gym this morning. It applies to everything in life.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that you're resisting, walk towards it, because it's clearly the thing that you need. So yeah, I absolutely love that and agree with that. And I guess that kind of brings us on to like the elemental, planetary, like zodiac side of crystals, because me mentioning saying I've got too much fire in my chart. So do you work with any crystals personally, or do you advise anyone in relation to what they might want to do in regards to, their zodiac and so on?
So this is commonly get people in like, I'm here for my birthstones, and
Right.
I think with the what you can like find on Google, what's your birthstone, isn't always the best first port of call. It can definitely
Yeah.
be fun to have your birthstone for sure, but sometimes your birthstone might be diamond, which isn't as easily accessible as something like amethyst. And I think sometimes the crystals makes sense for if you're like a classic Taurus, for example. Emerald would be really good for a classic Taurus because it's about like home life, love, relationships, marriage, and usually being a Taurus, that's things that you're wanting and are attracted to. So sometimes it makes sense like that. But I would go more like logically. So malachite, for example, is something I really recommend to classic Scorpios. It isn't something that is a set birthstone for them, but it helps let go of those toxic ties. Scorpios tend to hold grudges, so it helps overcome that issue. I would say that there's a planetary aspect and like energy to crystals. It can be hard to kind of really pick up. Neptune ones are easy to discover because if it's watery, chances are it's ruled by Neptune.
Yeah.
Greens and pinks generally are Venus. So again, it links back to the color magic. If you know your colors and how they correspond with the planets, that will give you a rough vibe to it as well.
Oh, so I really love this. And I was going to say, when you start to go into that, you kind of started to touch on the deity side as well. Where do you how do you see some of the typically aligned crystals with some of the deities? Do you feel that okay, so let me start that question again. I think you've got to, I feel for me, like when you think on some of the goddesses and so on, I think sometimes it can be, oh, this is a dark goddess, go for the black crystals. And that isn't always how I feel with it. So I've started to be a bit more feel into kind of, okay, so what do I think aligns with Hecate? And I think sometimes it isn't just, color stuff. It's like, what are their messages? So like, let's look at the Morrigan. Like she's very like fiercely, in my opinion, not everybody's opinion, we've all got different opinions on deities and all sorts. I see her as like very sexually liberated, very powerful, fiery, and maybe it's crystals that you want to like use those to bring that out of you, rather than just go for the black crystal because she's always considered as a dark goddess. But it may be that you also work with that deity because you feel they help you with areas like addiction, or okay, so when I was seriously in my addiction issues, I worked with smoky quartz like it was going out of fashion. Like it literally came everywhere. So yeah, it's like you can go off piece with that, because I think sometimes we're like this, and even I do it on the podcast. I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes I'm like, this deity is closely associated with this crystal. I think it's really nice to feel into it, see intuitively what you think, journey to meet them, see what they tell you, or what are you working with them for, to see what crystal they will kind of offer up. And I don't know if you sort of see that, or where you stand on the deity associations?
Yeah, I completely agree. Less like I work with Hecate, and yeah,
Yeah.
generally black crystals are a good fit, good starting point. But I
Hmm.
actually prefer things like gold sheen obsidian, which is a black crystal, but it's got like this golden, shiny underlayer. I like things like labradorite, larcovite that have flashes of color because
Yes.
she's the torch in the darkness. So I like
Yeah.
crystals that are black with
Yeah.
a brightness to them. So that's just, I suppose it's kind of poetic in a way. You can get poetic about it. I also work with Aphrodite / Venus, and you've got things like rose quartz, and basically any pink crystal would do. But I really like Larimar, which looks like sea
Mm.
foam. It's very expensive, but I'm sure that's kind of very much works well with her energies. And same as Caribbean calcite, which is actually from Pakistan, by the way. It's a gimmick name that,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Yeah.
that was a selling point, I think, for whoever created that trade name for the crystal. But that looks like the beach. So it's
Yeah.
kind of going into her born from sea foam energy. So yeah, you can
Yeah.
definitely spread out. And I think the closer you get to a deity, the more work you do, the more you'll see a crystal and recognize that energy in it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I think yeah, I think as well, it's like, I think that's when I started to kind of look into, I was very naive with crystal's origins. You've
Mm-hmm.
touched on that. We're saying about this from the Caribbean. Because I remember just getting so excited when I found out that smoky quartz was found in a part of Scotland. And I was
Yes.
like, no way. So I've got
Mm-hmm.
loads of, like, I've got Scottish ancestry. I feel so connected to, like, it's an area I feel so connected to. And I was like, no way. That's why literally this is my thing. This is my crystal. Like, I really
Mm-hmm.
felt that. And I just, sometimes when you, I think sometimes we don't realize how close to home some of these crystals are. We see them as beautiful, and yeah, we just kind of assume like, oh, exotic, tropical, that, but when you look at some that are here, it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
mind blowing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the UK is doesn't quite have as much colourful, but we've got some really awesome ones like Blue John Fluorite. Whitby Jet is another really famous one. We've got a fantastic Jurassic Coast for fossils, because when we talk
Yeah.
about crystals, we generally mean minerals, fossils, tektites, rocks, crystals, like as a together. And yeah, definitely. I found out, I think it was last year, that smoky quartz is the national gem of Scotland as well, because all my
Yes.
family's Scottish. Um, I guess I'm the first generation English technically. um, and yeah, I was just like, what? And yeah, I had no idea that, that my ancestral background had a crystal. Because yeah, your brain automatically thinks like Madagascar has some of the most amazing crystals. So your brain goes to there, or Brazil is another fantastic place. But yeah, they're everywhere. Except the Antarctica, and we don't really get to them there. It's too deep under the snow.
Yeah, but no, it's true. It's genuinely sort of blew my mind a little bit discovering that, and I was like, "Oh, you're my favorite. You're my favorite." um, I really love the concept about like Aphrodite, Venus, and really agree with you on the. I had a real phase of not working with Aphrodite, but taking on some of the energy of hers. I felt
Yeah.
like she was like really around and like really present. And
Mhm.
I loved getting into like the pink crystals, and just absolutely had a field day. There were just some real stunners that I've got. So I've got a real mix of like the really dark and loads of pink, and your smoky quartzes and stuff. But yeah, I think smoky quartz was the one that just, wow, I like, and you really can build a relationship with them, because I just remember that crystal, that chunk of crystal just came everywhere with me. I was like holding on to it, like, don't let me go to the shop and buy wine. Like, I was really
Yeah.
like it really like meant something to me. And you really can see it as like, and I was doing the work, like I was doing
Mhm.
all the other work, but this was just like my comfort blanket in a sense, which
Yeah.
is really, yeah, they really can hold some real
Yeah.
importance for you.
Yeah, smoky quartz is one of my favorite. It's the crystal, if you want, like, the key word for smoky quartz that comes to my brain is it's smoke cleansing in a crystal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of, and actually we touched a little bit on this, but is there anything in regards to, and actually sort of, I guess coming back to like the UK and the land and so on, is there anything in relation to animism or that aspect that you wanted to delve into?
Yeah, so animism is a personal belief. So I believe in animism, and I think it can definitely extend into crystals. I'm not saying that crystals and animism is the truth and that's it. You don't have to believe in this for crystals to still have their benefit. But just like animals, plants, and trees have spirit, which I think a lot of pagans do believe this, so do crystals and rock, and the earth itself, even the dirt in your garden, has a spirit to it. So it's so technically all these crystals that we have around us are little spirits. Some people also believe that they have like a collective spirit. So the clear quartz and all the quartz is a collective one entity spirit, which I suppose that's quite complicated. That's quite an intense concept as well. But yeah, very much the case that I find it quite easy to sit down, meditate with a crystal and feel a presence from it, not just an energy, but a presence that you can interact and talk with, much like you could with a deity or the fae, if you work with a fae, or just a tree spirit.
And
it's, that it's grown from Mother Earth and it's natural. You can get man-made crystals. Some people say that they have spiritual benefits, and I suppose that you could bring color magic into it. You could say, well, if it's this color, then it would have this association. I personally much prefer my crystals to have come from the earth, even if they're dyed or they've been purified, which is the process of spraying a metal on it, then heating it, which gives it a rainbow look. But metals are natural, so it's still bonding to natural minerals. I don't mind that as long as the crystal itself has come from the earth, because then it feels like it's come from the grid of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. On the grid of life concept, I don't know if I'm gonna go too deep on this, and we can certainly not hit on this if not. So I am late to the table in regards to conversations regarding Lemuria and star seeds and things like that. But are you of the thinking of the Lemurians and so on, kind of left behind and stored these crystals in the earth for us? Or do you have any other, should we put our tinfoil hats on and see if you want to go anywhere with this?
So I think it's something I'm still researching and learning about. So I'm always open and honest when I'm not confident in what I'm saying. But the general consensus is the Lemurians very well could have been a physical thing, or they very much could have been a spiritual entity, same as we have deities and things. Yeah. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a physical concept. But we currently use crystals in technology modern day. Quartz is probably the main one, as I'm going to probably butcher the pronunciation. I think it's piezoelectric. So with pressure, it can form, it can create electricity. So that's what does our phones, our computers, even watches. It has I don't know the science behind it.
No, don't worry. But you are right in that, and it does blow my swede. Genuinely, it is. But then that kind of, and I'm not, and I do want to get into this on the podcast, but I like the concept of us building on that, because the Lemurians were said to have these crystal towers that everything was powered from, and that's just always got my mind going, thinking if that were true, maybe there might be another time where we do get to do this and crystals are playing more of a part in that. And it's just fascinating. I do like putting my tinfoil hat on and exploring these concepts.
I do think that even if the Lemurians didn't exist, that we already have quartz and other crystals in technology. So what's to say that that's just not going to keep advancing?
Yeah, absolutely. What else can we do with it? And I think it is really interesting. I also I'm going to talk about this on the podcast at some point, but I want to say this without sounding really basic, but I watched something the other day still wearing my tinfoil hat, loads of Gaia stuff and so on about the pineal gland. And I like the concept of, and don't worry, I'm not going to ask you any questions on this, B. You probably know more than me anyway. But I like the concept that we are said to have right outside of our pineal gland. And again, please watch a program because I do not know what I'm talking about. These little crystals that are in and around it that kind of get activated, and the pineal gland gets activated. And I'm like, so we've actually got little crystals that we're just walking around within our brains. Like, who knew?
Yeah, I was actually researching that this morning just because I knew about it, but I thought, let's just have a little look before I go on the podcast. And it's like, I think it's called biomineralization. And they're starting to discover it. It's the same in plants as well. You can get crystals, and it's not always good. Like, you can get crystals in your kidneys. That's not what you get. But yeah, there's micro little crystalline structures, and like there's so many things of crystals that people don't think, like salt, which is what many people use in their spiritual practices. Salt is a crystal. It has a crystalline form. It's just highly dissolvable. Same as sugar. Well, sugar's a plant. I think people forget that as well. So things that are just, we take as, the mundane is magical, and I think people forget that.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you on that. And you're right. I think if you're kind of coming to this new, it's like, don't underestimate maybe the sort of lesser, maybe don't underestimate more of the well-known sort of simplified crystals and herbs and so on. So I think sometimes we kind of go for the jugular and think, I've got to get this moldavite or whatever. And it's like, don't undervalue, that smoky quartz did me well, or this, I love rose quartz. I'm not ashamed
I'm a rose quartz fan.
Yeah, I adore it. And I'm like, don't underestimate like the ones that seem more simplified and really common, because there is magic in that too.
Yeah, same as quality doesn't matter. Like, you can get high grade rose quartz it's called star rose quartz, where it catches the light and it forms like a star, and it's the highest quality. And then you can get something that's barely pink and it's quite cloudy. It's going to have the same amount of effect. It's just visual looks.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I love that. And you just can't tell how you're gonna feel when you're drawn to something and you go in somewhere and it's like, I have no idea, but this one's speaking to me. And forever amethyst and rose quartz lover.
Yeah. That's what I like about crystals as well. Although we can't just go out into nature and pluck it like we can some of the plants, it is quite readily available, like rose quartz, amethyst, clear quartz, smoky quartz, hematite, like so many different types. I could easily name 20 right now. You could get a tumble stone for £3 or less.
So exactly.
It's quite accessible.
If you could have any crystal in the world, what would you have? Money were no object or anything, or getting it was no object, what would you have?
Probably one of the insane Australian opals that just look like, just the precious opals, and the play of color is phenomenal. There's a YouTube channel that I watch. It's called, I think it's Gemology or something like that, and they just show like the highest millions of pound crystals, and the opals always blow my mind. I love it. I love crystals so much.
We can tell, definitely. Coming back to like the sort of the generals, like what would you reference in regards to, I know you said about selenite for cleansing. What would you recommend for just the basics? So what would you recommend maybe for like protection, for love? I don't know, there's certain areas that you're happy to sort of outline as just to maybe get started with this.
I can throw a couple out there for you. So protection crystals, I have, if it's reflective, it's protective. So anything that's reflective, like hematite, and this can even be things like silver. Most metals are usually protective because it reflects negative energy back out. Black crystals are good for protection because, so color is a form of frequency, and the color black actually absorbs other colors and generates heat. So what the black crystals do, so things like obsidian, tourmaline, would probably be my top 2 recommendations for ease of access. They're very protective but you can also be fancy. You can go for, one of my favorite is ancestralite, which is a rarer variation of hematite. For love, so interestingly, crystals rarely work in like on about like love as in get yourself a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner, but it usually starts with self-love and then it attracts partners. So rose quartz is an obvious go-to there, but I would also say rhodochrosite, which is not rhodonite. A lot of people get those confused. Rhodochrosite is very playful and flirty and fun. Because actually, just while this springs to my mind, going back to the colors, sometimes it isn't just the base color appearance. So rhodochrosite, when you look at it, it's obviously a pink crystal, but it has a very yellow undertone. It's a very yellow pink, which means it relates to the solar plexus as well as the heart chakra. So it's confidence and love. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those would be probably my top two. And chrysoprase for love, which is like this, it's a spring green and it very much renews the heart. For grounding, I would recommend petrified wood because it's a tree. Trees are very grounded. I would also recommend fossils for grounding. Fossils are very much earth energy because it's something that was living, that walked on the earth, that ends up getting under the earth, and it takes a long process. It also teaches patience. For divination and spirit work, I really recommend labradorite. So that there's like a flash to a labradorite. If you've ever seen it, you'll know what I mean. And that brings flashes of inspiration. And for me, when I'm doing like my tarot and I'm like, what is this card trying to tell me? I'll sit with my labradorite and it will just, the first image that pops to my head is like, I'll start to see it in my mind's eye. But I also really recommend lapis lazuli for any kind of divination or spirit work as well. For rest and relaxation, one of the top thing that people probably come into rocks and rubies for is stress. So for rest and relaxation, amethyst, which is the lavender of the crystal world, but also Amazonite, which kind of has the energy of a river and it just kind of washes away your stresses. Caribbean calcite for the same reason. It's very like having a day. It's got the beach energy, that kind of cleansing, calming energy. So yeah, there's just a couple off the like tip of my head.
I love that. Lastly, what about wealth? Are there any particular ones you like to use?
Number one, and I would probably go as far to say, oh, there's two, I guess. Pyrite. So pyrite is also known as fool's gold. It's very beautiful, especially in its raw form. And because it looks like gold, it's the manifest is sympathetic magic, and it's the manifestation of you've got something that looks like gold, act like you're rich, and it attracts that wealth for sure. To support that, I would also say green aventurine. So green aventurine is this happy-go-lucky energy, and it just seems to attract good luck, and often with good luck comes money.
Oh, I love that. Pyrite always just makes you think of pirate because it's the gold look as well. And I just thought,
I like that.
For money, I do love that. They're great. Actually, there's a few in there that I am not familiar with. So ancestralite is giving like protection and ancestral vibes.
Yes.
But have I made that up, or is that, I don't know, just kind of getting that off the name?
So generally by the name, you can get an indication. So the reason why it's called ancestralite is it's one of the oldest mineral formations that we are aware of. So geology people, I'm not trained geologist, when they discover minerals, they have ways of telling how old the mineral is. And ancestralite is like hundreds of millions years old. It's really old. So it's been there underneath us the whole time. So it's kind of, I guess, absorbed the energies, and it can help you work through your past lives or ancestors where you've been here before, because it's seen it. So it can help recall the time of when X life was here, if that makes sense.
Love that.
I love ancestralite. Oh, it's gorgeous as well. It glitters. Oh, no, it's quite a masculine crystal. It's like a dark steel grey and like maroon reds. But sometimes the hematite in it has like this real sparkliness to it. I love it. And it's really good for psychic protection, protecting against psychic vampires or energy vampires, because it just brings in your aura and it makes it dense like a shield, so nothing can kind of wiggle its way in.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. You said about color with that, and the fact that I've kind of come to that one is really interesting, because you're right, with past life work, a lot of the time color comes into it as well. You will kind of be asked, like, if you've ever had like a past life regression or done one of the meditations or the journeys, they'll often ask you like what color comes up, or if you do anything like the Akashic records, like what color is your book and things like that. And that's, I guess, another way, because you said about ancestral light, and when you said about the smoky gray, one of the past lives that like, I'm sounding like really out there and just going off onto this tangent, but I had smoky grey come up as in a past life. It was kind of like all I could see and all these things. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's one I've been drawn to, because I kind of need to work on that past life, because it's actually affecting things for me in this life. Like, it is the one that is like the crux point. So I think I might have a look into that. But again, all the ways you could use it, like, is a certain color coming up for you in like past life regressions, or that you need to maybe hone in on as well. So that was really interesting. I've never heard of ancestral light, and the information you gave was great. I was also going to ask you Amazonite. I know you said about connecting with like water and so on, and I guess, is that from the Amazon? Or
I think it was originally discovered near the Amazon River. It has since been found in other locations. But the crystal itself is like this beautifully aqua blue. High grade variations of it will have like darker veins of a deeper shade of like this aqua blue, which kind of look like delta part of the river where it kind of stretches out. But again, that's higher grade stuff. You don't need the higher grade stuff. But when you get the higher grade stuff, you can kind of visually see like, oh, I can see what they were saying now about why it's called this, that, or the other.
And I'm just going to be cheeky and ask one last question, which is how we got talking. When I came into the shop, I was looking at a very clear, not a selenite, I can't remember what it was, and I know we don't need to worry too much about the detail, but it was a very clear, and I remember you saying to me about, because I was saying, oh, I feel really drawn to a lot of the clear ones, and then we kind of got into like, I think we got into the crystals being high up and the angel influence and things like that. And is there anything you're happy to go into on that front? So I remember being wowed, like, oh, I didn't know this. The concept of them being higher up, and I think it was just like the angelic kind of connection through that, and being high in placement.
Yeah, so particularly with that crystal, that's Himalayan quartz, which is found, surprise, surprise, on the Himalayas, which is very high up. So these crystals specifically, you have to get you don't, but some very well-trained people with some special equipment go up there on a helicopter, and then they have to hand mine these crystals because it's that high up and it's that delicate. But because they're so high up, they've got the seat that you need to view the whole world from up high. So they see everything in the bigger picture. They have seen everything that's happened, overarching energy. So you can really access them for higher vibrational work, because they're not really. So more, how can I explain this? So as you go through the chakras from root to crown, there's like a vibration. The root chakra has got a dense vibration. This doesn't mean like low bad vibration, but it's dense, it's slow, it's earthy, and as you go up it gets like higher and higher pitched almost. And it's the same with these Himalayan quartz. You might be able to hear my cat in the background, by the way.
I love it when we hear a witch's cat on the podcast. It makes me feel like it's just real life. No, just made the podcast with that. And no, honestly, I just remember being really wowed by your information. And I just think people need to come into Rocks and Rubies just to get to chat with you, but for first and foremost, just know what they're buying, because that crystal from the Himalayas, you can go into Rocks and Rubies and pick one up, and they're not even, I think I got one, I think it's like £6. It's a beautiful little wand.
The little one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like that is in Colchester, like this crystal from the Himalayas, like that's just
like my boss Rob, who's the one who owns the store. He's got contacts worldwide, and you can ask if there's something specific you're wanting that's hard to get or overpriced on certain other places. Sometimes he can get it in, and he's a fair guy. If he gets a fair price and a good deal, you get a fair price and a good deal. So he's got like tons of the Himalayan quartz, and he made friends with a guy he's who handmade him in like a necklace. Rob's really awesome. And if you're wanting me, because I can't always post all my knowledge on the Rocks and Rubies social medias, because at the end of the day they're a shop and we do need to sell things, and I could talk for days. I have set up recently my own Instagram, which is sensual_sorcery, also on Facebook, just so I can get my knowledge out without having to have it from a sales perspective. Feel free to follow me on that. The whole, it's a really small business, Rocks and Rubies. There's like 5 of us in total, and that includes the online people. It's him and his mum are the main people in the shop. I'm there twice a week, and it's an absolutely lovely place.
Absolutely beautiful. Honestly, there are the biggest amethyst, like the hugest crystals I've ever seen anywhere in that shop. And I can't let you go without you telling us about the Moldavite side of the business, because you guys are actually specialists. And I know from doing researching and doing an episode on Moldavite, and I haven't got any yet. I'm still not there. I still feel like I need to do some work.
It's expensive.
And I've spoken to B about this and said, do you have any Moldavite? But can you tell us about that specialist side to the business? Because it isn't always easy to get Moldavite that is real. That's what my understanding of it is also.
So the fake Moldavite in the crystal community, I guess at the moment, it's really bad. You can even go to proper crystal and mineral shows that wholesalers are at, where people like my boss would go to source our crystals to sell, and we're finding fakes there. That's how bad the situation is at the minute. Sometimes they're really obvious, sometimes they're not. They usually have a really rough texture to them. They're not like a soft, polished glass. That would probably be my key thing. So Rocks and Rubies are also moldavite.uk. Which is hard to keep up supply and demand for this crystal, and it is expensive. It isn't easily accessible, but you don't need it, if that makes sense. There's other crystals that are high vibrational that you can work with, so don't feel pressure to ever buy this specific mineral. I was never massively drawn to it. I was more drawn to like Libyan desert glass, which is created in the same way. It's a meteorite impact, and then where it hit so for Moldavite, it hit the river Mulda, and the impact created glass, which is the tektite. And the reason why it's green is it's like got the algae in it. Fun fact. But the Moldavite, we do jewelry, we do raw pieces. Like we have a piece in the shop at the moment that is £350, and it's very light. It's very big, but it's light, if that makes sense. But we really try and source. We have good sources, and we try and just make sure people aren't getting ripped off for a hell of a lot of money. I bought some recently. I actually felt drawn to a pendant, and my life hasn't gone in flames like TikTok has told me it might have. I would say it definitely feels high vibrational, and the messages I usually get from spirit are quite cryptic. I think they usually are. They're not always very clear, but my dreams have been very evident. So rather than having a dream about, I don't know, just making this up, like 6 rabbits fell down a hole, it was like, and it showed me, I'm quite an open and honest person. It showed me the death of an uncle that happened shortly after my mum died. So I never dealt with that death. And I never realized this until I wore Moldavite for the first time, went to sleep. And my brain was like, yeah, you still have a problem with this. You never dealt with this trauma, and just showed me what was going on. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was just like a clear connection now to whatever I'm connecting to. I'm not too sure. But that's what I would say that mineral for me personally has had an effect. And I think when people have like, oh, I bought Moldavite or I bought malachite, now my life is ruined. And I think it's self-manifestation that I don't think any crystal has that power unless you got something that's toxic and ate it. That's, you've set in your mind that you're going to buy this and this is going to happen. And that is magic within itself.
Oh, yes, agree. That's so on point, because I feel I need to still do some personal work on myself before I bring Moldavite into my life. I feel there's certain things I need to work through, and then I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, fuck around and find out and see what it's going to throw up. But genuinely, like you, I feel like I'm much more balanced and maybe at a better time to bring it into my life, because I have done a lot of work. But before, I think it would have just been, and I'm not saying that crystal, but it would have thrown up a lot for me. And I think I love what you said about the dreams, because I agree. And I believe that if you're going to get good quality, and it should be of a decent price, because Moldavite isn't a crystal that's going to be, it's a limited supply, isn't it? It's
100%.
Like, therefore, you know, when it's gone, it's gone. It's not just going to be there forever like a lot of other crystals will be. So yeah, you need to kind of really make sure like you're getting the real deal and not wasting your money. And
but also be wary it's not too cheap, because if it sounds like too good to be true and it's Moldavite, it's too good to be true.
Absolutely. It's why I haven't bought any either, because I'm like, I'd rather get some of the real deal, like a pendant from you guys or whatever, because I'm like, you know, I feel like I'm just going to drop some money and it's not even real. It's just going to make the lips go green or whatever. But joking.
It is a shame that there's people out there that just get on, because, you know, people are buying this to try and improve and better themselves. It's not just people. I mean, you do get collectors and more like gemologists, geologists, but the majority of people getting it are just your everyday person trying to improve themselves. And it's a shame that people really try to prey upon that. Same with fake readers and things. Like, since I started the sensual sorcery Instagram, I've had several people message me, and I don't mean just a message like, oh, I would like to do a reading for you, but really quite intrusive. And I'm thinking, this needs to change. This is going to put beginner people off of ever getting involved in this, and that's not what we want.
Exactly. They always send you that special message like, hello dear, I felt really drawn to read for you today. And you're like, delete, block.
It's just like when you're walking down the street and you get, excuse me, are you with like this internet provider? And it's like, leave me alone, I'm trying to go to the shop. It's harassment.
Great fun. But the sad thing is, I've, you know, got friends that are hugely credible, and they are readers, and they've built up this whole network, done all this work, and they're so affected by areas like that. So we do have like a responsibility, because their business is directly impacted. Other people like create a fake account of mine. I don't know what, I couldn't read for anyone for toffee, but literally, somebody, if anyone ever listened to the podcast and someone got a message from someone saying, oh hi, I felt drawn to give you a reading, they'd be like, that's Carly, she can't read for toffee, I won't worry. But yeah, I do feel like it's really hard, because we do need to kind of keep things, you know, tidy up that side of the street, because so many of our fellow, you know, spiritual witchy types are going to get impacted with their trade. So again, with the crystals, like I love that you guys genuinely love that you know your stuff. Like, this is in no way like sponsored by Rocks and Rubies or anything.
I don't even own Rocks and Rubies.
Me just meeting V going like, this lady, she knows her stuff, I like her, she's got to come on. I also feel like what you said about the dreams and the way the messages, that they're not always straightforward. I have got a little bit of a feeling on that, because again, like with Moldavite, they often say like there's no deity or anything we can connect with this. We see it as being connected to extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of like connection with angels, and that is because from a sort of few years ago, I've always had dreams with numbers in, and I believe that when we get those messages, like they're usually through patterns, so kind of like why things like, I don't know, like sacred geometry and like numbers and things like that make sense, and it is the way they can communicate things to us. So you can go off and like look up the angel number, and it like is like, oh my goodness, I needed to hear that. So I get angel numbers kind of like, I always sound like I'm totally bonkers saying this, but literally can every night get angel numbers, and I'll get a succession of them, and I'll go off and write out what my dream was, and they'll kind of make sense. But I believe, and I'm just going to put my tin hat on again, that the angel extraterrestrial and like the Lemurian thing, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, it almost can be that they all connect. Like with Lemuria, it is said that when it was coming to the end of their time, and it was like they knew that they were going to have to leave, everything was going to be destroyed, they put out a call for all these volunteers, like these golden light beings, and they would look over the future races or what was happening on the planet and come to their aid, like whenever they would be called upon. And if you look at that concept, it is like the angel concept of, if you call, they will come through, they're like of light, or 3,000 eyes, or however we want to see the angels, or however they might appear. So I feel like it is this crossover where there's an overlap with the kind of extraterrestrials and the angels. And I don't know, that's like me, my tinfoil hat on, which is why I kind of feel drawn to Moldavite, because I feel like if you feel like maybe like an angelic connection, or you feel like you're a star seed, you feel like you're from Lemuria, maybe Atlantis or whatever, it might be something that you want to go into. There are other crystals obviously that link to angels and Lemuria and Atlantis and so on rather, but it can be a really good area to kind of go, a good rabbit hole to go down and work with crystals on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the way that you say that like angels and extraterrestrial things could be, at the end of the day, very similar or one and the same. Like the same with deities. I feel like the universe or the cosmos, whatever you want to call it, is like a rainbow of ever-changing colors, and you have an essence. So let's say, for example, I work with Aphrodite, Venus. I generally put them together because the myths of Aphrodite and Venus are very similar, and it's like, if you follow archaeology, it's literally one did evolve into the other. But it doesn't mean that I'm working with this single entity called Aphrodite Venus, but it is like the color pink, I guess, where it's feminine energy, it's sensuality, it's sexuality, it's spiritual love, it's earthly love. And then you've got Freya, who is the Norse goddess of love, but she is also like the witch goddess. She does Seder magic. So she's almost like, she's the color pink, for example, but she's also got that purple in her. But it's just looking at the same cosmic energy from different angles, and depending on your culture and the time you were born. So if I was born in ancient Greek, I might see this love energy as Aphrodite, where if I was born in more Nordic time, Norse times, I would have viewed her as Freya. And I think that could be the same with angels and aliens, that it's the same kind of energy, just viewed from different points of view or different angles.
You are on the same school of thought as me, because they also say, don't they, like the pantheons like Tuatha De Danann and all of that were like descendants from heaven, or and then again you've got that whole 5D kind of like, and also the Fae, because there is that concept of that other dimension, but there is that also that belief that could just be, we're not saying aliens big grey heads and
yeah
pointing T fingers. there are many different ways that the 5D can manifest and and things appear. It's not just grey-headed, big boggle-eyed aliens.
Yeah.
That would be so cute because E.T. is a whole vibe. Like, he's adorable. But
sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay. I was thinking also, if you were very scientific minded, you never had any kind of spiritual exposure, and you watched alien films and you had a supernatural experience, your automatic brain might go, that must have been aliens. You know what I mean? So it's even with when some people are like, oh, it was a grey-headed alien, maybe that's just the way it came to them.
And also, like, I love this conversation. We're really getting into this because they say, don't they, where you've got a lot of, like, in quotation marks, like alien sightings, you get things like cryptids, you get things like the Fae, you get like lights. The crossover's real, you know. There are like pockets of space and places. I mean, I could riff on this all day, but yeah, there is such a crossover, and I don't think we always consider. We're so brainwashed with the, like, again, big grey-headed, boggly-eyed aliens. It isn't actually like that. Same as the Fae aren't tiny little pocket-sized people. You know, like there might be some like that. I don't doubt that there are, but you also got you've also got 7 foot tall ones, 8 foot tall ones. So it's like, I think the more you try and figure it out, the more confusing it gets. But it is that concept of, I just think they all kind of cluster and combine together, and that 5D and that veil is just, you know, bonkers. Yeah. But yeah, I love that we ended up on this. So thank you for going
No
there.
No worries.
So I will put everything in the show notes, links wise, in regards to Bianca's work, where you can find her, where you can find Rocks and Rubies. I highly recommend you, if you are in the UK, if you're not, get over to Colchester, check out Colchester Castle. There are like witchy memorials there. They recently had a witch exhibition, which is, I believe, coming to an end end of January. But yeah, get over there, see all the witchy stuff, and make sure you make a trip to Rocks and Rubies. Is there anything else you want to leave us with at all?
Yeah, that's something just sprung to mind. We also do worldwide shipping, by the way. But yeah, so one other thing that crystals really connect with is sympathetic magic. So it does it in a couple of different ways. I've talked about how pyrite attracts wealth. So that's sympathetic magic. And it follows that as within, so without, as above, so below. So it's things like amber, which is a fossilized tree resin. Trees create resin when they are injured, and the resin will protect it from any further damage and will heal it. So therefore, amber is good for protection and healing. So that's another kind of layer to crystals. And it's things like blue lace agate has these lovely lines in them. And what blue lace agate does is it works with your throat chakra, and it helps you organize your thoughts and your words so that you can communicate. So the lines are the organization. And then you've got fluorite that has an optical illusion, where this is, again, usually with high grade, where you can visually see it, where if you hold it up to the light, the colors have an ombre effect. But if you angle it right, they actually become very solid lines of distinct color. And what fluorite does is it takes confusion and disorganization and it brings it into focus and into clarity. So that's like another layer to the crystals. But I think that's roughly it. I could go on and talk for hours and hours and hours. But yeah, I'm in the process of making a book. It will be unlike other books that are on the market. So it's going to talk about how crystals work and kind of breaking them down into kind of more easy to access and understand them, as opposed to just talking about like very high spiritual words that can be very confusing to someone who's just getting into crystals.
Well, take my money, because I would literally buy that immediately, because I've learned more from you than I've learned in probably about 4 or 5 like crystal books. So
brilliant. That's good to hear. Yeah, the support is appreciated. Thank you.
And I'd love to have you back on again if you'd come on. Honestly, this has been absolutely my mind is blown. My Swede is blown. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Having me.